What's up, bottom feeder? Paupergeddon it was, and now it's time to draw the conclusions. This will be a different video because we are gonna analyze the data from the event and we are gonna see if our predictions have been correct or not and try to understand what's up with this event. Stay with me and we will do some math. So, as strange as it might seem, we're not gonna start by the top 8 or the winner, because we are gonna do some statistical analysis, and 8 players are not very representative, right? Maybe they were very good, maybe they have been lucky, who knows. We need to go to see the bigger picture. So we're gonna start by the meta breakdown. Here you see how much every deck has been played. And remember, the tournament had a structure on 2 days. So day 1 it was 8 rounds, and then every player who has more than 2 losses could not advance to day 2. So here you see, for example, Mono Red Synth has been played by 96 players in day 1, and just 23 of those players advanced to day 2. So 16%, right? And you can calculate an average conversion rate. But what's that? So in day 1 you had more than 1000 players, and in day 2 you had this number 147, right? So if you take 147 and you divide that by 1000 and blah blah blah, you get this number 13.7%. So it means that just 13.7% of the people who played in day 1 advanced to day 2. So if every deck performed the same, 13.7% of the people playing that single deck should advance to day 2. Of course, that's not the case, because some decks are better than others, but that's the average. So it means that roughly we can say if a deck had a conversion rate of like 13.7%, so again, if 13.7% of the people playing that deck advanced to day 2, it had an average showing, we might say. If the conversion rate is below this threshold, then we might say that the deck didn't do very well, and if the conversion rate is bigger, the deck performed better. Of course, these are oversimplification, and in this video we go in depth of that, but for now there's a way to start. But before we move on, before the tournament I did some prediction, and I think it's right to see where I guessed right and where I guessed wrong, because I should take my responsibilities, right? Let's see. Okay, so I said that John would be like 10-12%, let's say 11% roughly, and it was 15%. Why I put this symbol here? Because I also said in the guide of Spy that affinity would be like 6%, and it was like 3%. So these two were not very accurate. But since John and affinity are roughly the same deck, together they are 18%, and it's roughly what I said it would be. And I know it might seem like I'm kidding you, but if you think about it, when you prepare for a tournament, most of the cards that are good versus John are also good versus affinity, because they are similar decks and they have similar matchup spreads. Of course, John is way better than affinity in my opinion, but it's very hard for a deck to be good into John and not versus affinity, or the other way around, right? Then I said that all the burn decks, so Black Red Madness and Mono Red burn decks and all that stuff, would have been like 15-20%. The average is like 18%, and I was wrong here because it was way higher, 23%, which is incredible if you think about it. It means that roughly 1 in 4 people would point lightning bolts at your face as main strategy, and 1 out of 4 players, it's very high. And fairies and terrors, I think I guessed very right. Tide, no, I think I was wrong here, because I said like 6% and it's 4%. I know 2% is not a great difference, or so it seems, but when we are talking about small numbers like 6%, then a 2% difference is very high, because it's like 33% less, right? And the same is true for Dispute Tron. When I say Tron, I'm talking about Tron with dispute effects, not Flicker Tron. So at the end of the day, I think I did a pretty good job at predicting the metagame, and even if I was wrong about something, it's kind of funny that it was even better for the deck I would have played, because Altertron is good into burn decks. Okay, so let's move on. Now let's see the conversion rate, because we could analyze the conversion rate on every deck to see how it performed. First of all, I'm not talking about decks with less than 3% meta share, because if a deck is played by like 5 people, 3 of them are very good with the deck and make day 2, then the deck has 16% conversion rate. But that's not saying really something, because that's just 5 people. We need bigger numbers. These are the decks that had more than 3% meta share. And let's see who performed the better. Well, Synth has a 24% conversion rate, so it performed very, very well. And also Terror and Tide did a pretty good job. And what about Rakdos Madness? Well, Rakdos Madness did poorly. Why is that? I'm not very sure. Maybe it's because everyone was prepared for the burn decks. But then why Synth went this well? Well, because if you think about it, if you want to combat Rakdos, you do with like life gain stuff, and if you wanna combat the rally Mono Red creature aggro decks, you do with Wraths. So when you pack your sideboard with anti-burn cards, you have to decide, do you wanna play Weather the Storm or do you wanna play Breath Weapon? And since nowadays a lot of burn decks uses the bolt at your face strategy, gain life are better, so many people were prepared versus those kind of decks. So maybe that's an explanation, but of course I'm not 100% sure. And what about Terror and Tide? Well, I think Tide is a very good deck. It's no surprise to me that it did well. And also Terror, I think it's reasonable that it did well, because there was a lot of Mono Red decks and could be set up to beat Mono Red. So I think that kind of explains what happened. And what about Jund? Jund had a below average conversion rate. So one may think that Jund isn't that good overall, right? I don't think that's true. Well, first of all, you got to remember that Jund was the most single play deck with 15%. So when a lot of players pick up a deck, the win rate goes down because the good players play the deck, but even the less good players. While when a deck is played by less people, usually those are the aficionados, which knows the deck very well and they are better than average with the deck. That's a common pattern in Magic. When a deck is very, very played, the win rate goes down. And also Jund is a deck which is very, very slow, and that would eliminate people, because when you need to reach day 2, a draw, it's kind of like a loss, right? Also, everyone expected Jund, right? Everyone prepared for Jund. That would lower the win percentage of the Jund deck. What about Tron? Previously you saw that Tron had a 3.5% meta share. So why is not here? Because this label is used for different flavors of Tron. There is the Ultra Tron one and the Win-Conless Tron. None of them reached the 3% meta share, but Ultra Tron had a 20% conversion rate, which is very good. But as I said, since it had a meta share which was below 3%, I don't think that's saying too much. Something that kind of surprised me is that Elves did well. And it's strange because I don't think Elves is very good into the burn decks, but as it turned out, it somehow did well in this tournament. So probably I was wrong about the matchup and I underestimated the Elves' ability to play into the red decks. I don't know, probably. Okay, here we see the conversion rate of the arguably 3 best decks in 3 different Paupergeddons. At Paupergeddon Lucca 2024, Uvu Glitter was the best deck by far. It was played by 74 people and 22 of them advanced to day 2. And the conversion rate was 13%, which is very, very high. And the average conversion rate was 20%. Why was it 20% while in this Paupergeddon it was 13%? Well, you have to remember that in Paupergeddon Lucca 2024, the cut was after the 7th, not the round number 8, right? And what about BG Glee, which was by far the best deck in Paupergeddon Lucca 2025? 59 players played the deck and 19 of them advanced to day 2. The average conversion rate was 22% and 32% of them advanced to day 2. So again, a very good deck, which was over the line. And those 2 decks have to be banned because they were played in a lot of numbers. Remember, those Paupergeddons had fewer players, roughly 600 players, and the conversion rate was incredibly high. While with Jund Wildfire, we have a conversion rate which is lower. This is to say that Uvu Glitter and BG Glee were decks that needed to go. Jund Wildfire, it's not at that level. I I still maintain it's the best deck in the format, but I think this is a healthier format than the previous ones. Let's see the top 8 though. Okay, so the winner was Caw Gates, a player for Rome, and congrats to Karocci. This is very strange to me because I honestly don't think Caw Gates is very well positioned in the metagame overall, but of course it's very good into Mono Red, and we saw that 23% of the people was playing burn decks, and so maybe I underestimated the power of Caw Gates in the metagame. Then you have 2 terror decks, and again I think those 2 decks are good into Mono Red, so it kind of explains why they reached the top, maybe. Red Green Aggro, I think it's a fine deck. I jokingly released a video called "Don't Play This Deck," but it was of a joke, and also my list was an experimental one. I think the deck is fine, and since John Wildfire removed every toxin analysis from the 75, then Red Green Aggro it's very good into Jund. And you can pack your sideboard with life gain cards and be good into the non-swarmy burn decks. And Altertron is a very good deck, and I said in the previous video that a Disputron deck was one of the 3 decks to play, so it's not strange to me that Altertron reached the top 8. As I said earlier, probably Mono Red Rally was the better positioned burn deck because a lot of people went for the life gain stuff, while the rat effects are better versus that version of the deck. And also it's no surprise that one burn deck made the top 8, right? Because 23% of the people played the deck, so with those numbers it's kind of bound to happen. And Mardu, I don't know the deck very well, so I will not talk about that because I don't have anything of note to say about that. I wanna say congrats to everyone who reached the top 8 of the event, because reaching a top 8 of a tournament so big, it's not an easy task. And of course, they have been very, very good. Of course, some luck have been involved in the process because Magic is like that. It's a game of variance. That doesn't mean that they didn't deserve the top 8, right? And you know, after the recording of the video, I decided to add a new part, but for some reason I destroyed the thing that keep up my microphone. So for this part, you see that my microphone settings has changed again. I'm sorry for that. I will recover for the next one. Somewhere in the video I said that the numbers are a useful tool, but they are not everything and they can be misleading, and here is why. First of all, the data we have access to right now is the conversion rate, and that only accounts for the day 1 performance. Maybe a deck is very good in day 1 but not so much in day 2. For example, because in day 1 the metagame is more diverse and you tend to find a lot more tier 3 and tier 4 decks. Those decks are tier 3 and tier 4 for a reason, and usually they don't reach in high numbers day 2. And maybe a deck is very good into the non-meta decks and does well in day 1 but not in day 2, or the other way around. For example, Mono Blue Fairies is a deck that it's not very powerful, and usually it's in the metagame when it's good versus the tier 1 decks. So it usually does well as long as you face the top tiers, and not so much when you face the other decks. So maybe that's a deck that tend to perform better in day 2 and not convert all that well. And also in day 1 you usually face less experienced players, and maybe a deck like, for example, Flickertron, which is a very hard deck to play against, it's better in day 1. That can be true sometimes. Also, there are a lot of data that could be interesting, but we don't have access to right now. For example, the win rates. Remember that even though 1,000 players are no joke, when you think about statistical things, 1,000 players is not so much, because they are 1,000 people split up in like 40 decks. The number are still too little to draw too many conclusions. So the main takeaway here is use the numbers, but do that with a grain of salt. When it comes to the top 8, those are just 8 players. Maybe someone has been very, very lucky. Maybe someone played just the matchups that he wanted to face. And maybe someone is very, very good with a deck, and so he did very well, but the deck is not that strong overall. There are a lot of things to consider. In my opinion, what the data really show is that maybe we should start respecting the burn decks a little bit more. before the end of the video, I want to say thank you to Tommaso Los Ciurlo on Magic Online, which helped me design this PowerPoint and helped me analyze those data, because it's not an easy task. It's something that you should do carefully. They contain a lot of information, but they can be misleading if you're not very focused. So thank you very much. And you know, I've come to the conclusion that Tommaso, it's a very good guy, it's very good at Magic, it's very kind when you ask him something, and maybe we have been mad at him for not wearing the shirt of the team for much too long. So maybe it's time to forgive him. Ciurlo, you have been forgiven. That's it for today. I know this is kind of a strange video. I hope you liked it. I hope you had the time to reach out for the Mezzo Channel Friends guys, and I hope the Paupergeddon has been a very good experience for you. Let me know in the comments meant for you. As always, you can check and as always, if you need some data sheets, you can find mine in the description of the video. I will link the site of Mezzo Channel Friends, where you can use my affiliate code GiorgioCombo to buy some tokens with a 5% discount. If you like this video, tell everyone, and if you didn't like this video, well, no problem in that, because everyone is entitled in their own opinion, right? So, goodbye.